Today I am turning this ugly little edge of my yard into an edible, functional food forest.
Food forests, the dream, maybe even gold standard of permaculture enthusiasts, garden designers, home gardeners, and definitely lazy gardeners. If you don't know, a food forest is where we plant a self-sustaining ecosystem that mimics that of a real forest, only everything or nearly everything in there is edible. We plant it once, we barely need to maintain it, and we just harvest it for years and years. But the problem that many gardeners run into is that these usually need to be the size of a forest. So what I'm going to do in this video and show you how to do along the way is build a food forest that can fit in any backyard.
Now this spot might actually look pretty big on camera, but in reality it's only about 1 meter by 4 meters, so 4 square meters. So we're trying to pack a whole lot of vegetation into a really small area. And this is something that you should be able to replicate in any sort of suburban backyard. Now, if you don't know what a food forest is, we essentially are trying to replicate the ecosystem of a forest, only with a whole bunch of edible plants. And what we end up with is a really low maintenance, really productive area of the garden where we can always just come and grab something edible from. There is this whole big design philosophy around food forests in which we work in what's called layers, where we work from the very top of the canopy and try and make that productive all the way down to the little ground covers and even below the soil itself to try and make as much of this space as possibly productive as possible. And I'll cover how that works along the way and also how I'm modifying that a little bit to work in smaller spaces, because that sort of philosophy is meant to apply to large areas where we're literally trying to create a fairly sized little forest.
In order to get moving with this project, I need to get the soil ready. If you want to skip the soil prep and jump straight to when I'm planting out stuff, jump to this time code on screen. A big theme of this project is going to be reusing materials that I already have. And I'm going to take this soil prep opportunity to actually kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because there's another bed that I have to dig soil out of, so I'm going to use some of that.
You're probably wondering why I am going to be digging up soil out of this bed instead of just maybe putting new soil straight onto that. Won't I be doubling up in some sort of way by getting stuff out of this? Well, one of the mistakes that I have been dealing with all summer, which has really hampered the productivity of both of these 2 garden beds over here, is when I filled them up, there was no compost available at any of the local nurseries or landscape supply places, which is something that I hadn't considered because I've never actually built garden beds in the middle of spring before. But in hindsight, of course, they're probably going to be out of all of their really cheap compost. So I ended up going with a premium topsoil and then as much compost as I could put through it, which is, the compost is mostly on the top. So the first sort of 10 centimeters or so of these beds are perfect, they work great, but then under that is so ridiculously compacted. I think because of the premium topsoil that I bought, it's just kind of maybe a bit sandy or silty and it's all just clumped together. And as I have been pulling crops out of these beds and then planting the next thing, the step that I've been doing in between that is pulling out a lot of this soil and then replacing it just with straight compost. It's been working out well. That's what I've done here. That's what I've done with the bit that's covered in the gardener's fleece at the end. That is garlic. So I've done all that there. This last bit I've got to do, and guess what? As I've been doing that, I've been dumping it onto this bit of the garden, which is going to become the food forest. So I'm going to scrape back what is still just really good and healthy compost. I'll leave that in this bed because tender annual veggies need really good humusy soil, a lot more than something that's going to get established over many years. And then we're going to dig out a lot of this and chuck it on those beds.
The shovel was doing hardly anything to this soil, so I had to bust out the hand tiller just to loosen it up to be able to even think about being able to shovel it into the buckets.
Yeah, check this out. This is ridiculous. Like, it is gone properly solid. I've never seen this happen to this degree in anything other than just straight like clay that sits under your house. This is ridiculous. I was so mad when I first found out that this is happening because I went to dig up some...
After devolving into an old man who yells at dirt for 20 minutes, I needed to get back to work. I started by clearing off the temporary mulch off my new food forest area. Using hedge trimmings like this on an exposed patch of soil that you're eventually going to be planting into is a great idea. It'll help prevent erosion and help start some sort of a microbiome underneath that mulch.
All right, one of the things I'm doing that's a bit funny is I have this old compost tumbler. I've been meaning to move closer to the house, and oh my God, I didn't know that it does that. This should be fine to just dump out. And one of the funny things that I noticed in this tumbler is that at some point someone's put a full jar of passata in here. Well, the microbes have definitely eaten off the label, so that's nice.
With my new propagation jar cleaned up for me by the microbes, I could finally move along with a light bed tilling to help remove any remaining rocks still in the bed, because this is what this area used to look like and I'm still finding rocks underneath the soil each and every day. Then I pull back the remaining mulch so that I can finally start topping up this bed with healthy topsoil. What you're seeing as the 30 seconds on screen is about 2 or 3 hours of shoveling, dumping and mixing soil. If this was just untouched clay soil, you could definitely get away with just putting compost on top, but because these beds have this history of being covered in about a foot of decorative stones, there's not much of a reason to not mix around the soil in with the native soil that's already there. To make sure I don't end up with the same issue of the topsoil clumping together, I'm adding in about the same amount again of compost.
Now we've basically done our soil prep for the area. All the soil and compost is in. We will add a bit more compost and probably some more fertility as well once we're actually planting stuff out, so that each plant starts with the best possible chance, because ultimately underneath, once we get down about 10 or so centimeters, then the soil quality does get a bit poor. We might replace some of it underneath depending on exactly what plant we're planting where. A couple last steps that we'll do for this area is I just have a mix of granular slow release fertilizer. This is a mix made for roses and berries, and I've also added in some additional soil wetter here. Soil wetter just helps distribute water through an area, which is usually a pretty good thing to do with new beds, especially under ones like clay. It'll really help stop water pooling in some areas. It'll help relieve any channeling so that the water actually does distribute properly. And then the reason that it's a rose or berry mix fertilizer is that the majority of what we're planting will prefer a slightly more acidic soil. This helps lower the pH or raise the acidity. The other thing I'll chuck in is just this Plant Doctor Stimulizer. Not sponsored, they have sponsored the channel before. It's just a good product. You only add in a couple mils to a watering can for every, you only add in a couple mils for basically an entire garden bed. What this does is it helps stimulate the microbial activity, and it's also full of humic and fulvic acid, which I've done a full video explainer on about how that works. It helps the soil hold onto nutrients, helps plants soak up the nutrients, and it also helps do cool things like clean away old pesticides and herbicides. Not that that's really going to be an issue over here, but nonetheless, it's a really good product to use. Right, now to the fun bit. What are we actually planting? When it comes to planning out and planting out your urban food forest, the way that we usually design them is starting from the top and then going down. When I'm talking about the top, I mean the literal physical top. So the first layer of food forest is typically your really top of the canopy nut trees, things like macadamias or chestnuts. Those trees that can grow up to about 20 meters tall. And then our sort of next layer down are our more orchardy sort of trees that grow more 5 meters tall, things like citrus trees. If you're designing this in your backyard, you can choose sort of which one of those you're starting with. Because I'm trying to be so compact and I also don't really feel the need to have nut trees, the top of my canopy will be these citrus trees. These are, even though they're quite small at the moment, they're not really dwarf varieties. Well, this one is, which I have conveniently planted on the north side so that it should help not shade out the rest of the beds. The other two should grow as big as the big lemon tree behind me. And then next we would usually move down to our shrubbing layer But because this is against a fence, we're going to change what we're putting in first and almost substitute our top of the canopy layer for our climbing layer so that we can actually trellis things up against this wall and really use as much of our vertical and depth of the garden bed as much as possible. So that I'm going to start by putting in some climbing plants. And to do that, I'm going to use this recycled concrete Rio, or concrete reinforcement steel, I guess it'd be called, that I got given, and I've had no idea what to do with this until about a week ago when I realized it's going to fit perfectly in behind these citrus trees. I will have to try and just straighten this out a little bit though.
Concrete Rio makes an incredible trellis material if you can get it on the cheap. This has come from a family friend's farm, so I didn't pay a cent for it. However, this is absolutely not worth it if you're buying it brand new from Bunnings, where it costs you nearly $100 a panel. The name of the game with trellises is generally using whatever material you can just get your hands on for cheap. However, there are a couple of mistakes that beginners might make that don't know otherwise, and I'll go over them now. One of the things you do have to be really careful with putting trellises near or especially on fences is that usually plants will be able to grow quick enough and heavy enough to where they can actually put a lot of stress on the fence and actually pull them forward. So one thing I'm not going to do is mount this to the fence. I will tie it to it in some form, just more so as stability, but I don't want that to be the main thing that's holding it there in place. So I'm going to put a stake or two in to act as the main sort of weight support of this. And then I'm also just want the tying of this to the fence just to kind of help it in times of high wind. Now star pickets or star posts would probably work a little bit better for this, be a little bit steadier and longer lasting compared to these wooden tree stakes. But a big theme of, I think I just hit you on the nose. I'm so sorry, Finn. Come here. Oh, I was waving that hammer around. Oh, I'm so sorry. Where was I? Star pickets would probably work better. I've chosen to roll with these tree stakes because that's what I already have on hand. And a really big theme of this project for me, and a lot of these kind of upcoming projects, is just trying to use what I already have available to me, which is something that you should probably be doing as well. Like if I didn't have this, I would be working out some other solution that is whatever the cheapest for me is, and also whatever uses the most recycled materials as I can. So that's why for this project, I'm using tree stakes for this. After successfully re-establishing dominance over my hound, I continued constructing my trellis, however quickly ran into some problems. There's a thing about this bloody spot. There was another layer of rocks underneath where I'm trying to dig in this trellis, which I got really good camera shots of me removing. In total, I spent about an additional half an hour clearing out rocks from underneath this trellis before I could continue with finally putting it in properly. So what's annoying is I actually have proper fencing wire that I even put aside for this project, but I can't find it. Or maybe I use it all up in a sword fight, but instead I'm just gonna have to roll ahead with just using cable ties, which again is stuff that I already have on hand, so I don't really feel too bad about using it. Even though I do, as a rule of thumb, try to keep everything pretty plastic free in my garden, where possible. But it's pretty much impossible because it's so good for gardening, lightweight, cheap, waterproof. It's pretty unavoidable sometimes. Doing this does make me think about how my dream, like I'm sure many home gardeners, is to one day just have a bit of a hobby farm. It's kind of my life goal. It makes me think about how farming is most likely probably actually about 90% fencing, building fences, maybe 10% actually planting and looking after veggies, and probably the last 10% what, tax evasion? With the entire contents of the TAFE agricultural course covered, I could clean up the cable ties to finally move along with planting. Now that we have the trellis in, we can put in our climbing plants. Now there's two, well one's definitely climbing, the other's just kinds of needs support, so I'll still use it. The first one is passion fruit. This one's going to be a grafted passion fruit, which means that we only have to plant one in order for it to be able to fruit. If you get it ungrafted, I believe you need to be able to plant two so that they can pollinate properly. Grafted's also just a lot hardier, a lot better in poor soils. So for the extra, I don't know, $3, $4, it's usually better going for a grafted. And if you want ungrafted, you can also just take cuttings from it once this gets established. And the other one is I've got some thornless blackberries. The tube stock's the only size that I could get of this. Now the main thing I need to do is decide a little bit of the design of what else is going in these beds, because these are going to be at the back. I need to be able to physically get to them.
And some of the other plants are going to have spikes on them. So I'm going to do what's going to be really bad for this video's retention, but really good for you because it's the way that you should actually design a garden. And we're going to try and lay out what everything else is. So let's talk about at least the next couple layers of plants. Okay, so I have plants that I definitely want to go in, and I have some options. Obviously the passion fruit and blackberries I want to put in, I've already got them. Some other ones that I definitely want to fit in, which is the kind of next layer down from your more shrubby sort of plants, which you can kind of include as citrus. All the berries. So I've got gooseberries, boysenberries, and currants, black currants. And these are what I definitely want to get in. I also have the Australian native midgeonberry, which if you want to have these gardens do really well and be quite low maintenance, trying to find whatever other native edibles you can put in are good. Like I also have as an option a finger lime, which is in a very heavy pot, is very spiky. So that's one of the reasons that I might opt not to put it in, just if it makes the design of the area too difficult. Another good one that's easy to keep kind of low as a shrub is lily pilly. I've already got a couple lily pillies at my house that are very prolific fruiters, so I definitely don't need more of them. In addition to that, I have a tamarillo tree, which I got on clearance because it's been frost damaged, but I'm pretty confident I'll be able to look after it, even though we are heading into winter. But you just need to cover it from frost, which I will be doing to basically this whole garden anyway. And then I've also got a bay tree, which these can get quite big and out of hand, but this is something I will pretty aggressively keep pruned to keep quite small, because you never need too many bay leaves at once. And yes, this is the tree that bay leaves come from.
To decide how exactly I'm going to fit all these plants together, I'm doing what's called a layout, which is where we take the plants in the pots and put them physically where we think they will be planted out. I'm only doing this for the shrub layer and the climbing layer. The shrub layer consists of berries and larger herbal plants. And if you want the space to be more productive but a bit higher maintenance, this is a great place to also plant some larger annuals. Things like spinach and silver beet and kale. By doing that, you'll be able to harvest from the food forest quicker, but it'll also be a bit higher maintenance, and you'll need to be replanting those a couple times a year, as opposed to my design, where I'm really emphasizing low maintenance.
All right, one delicious lamb pasta later, I've come back out, re-looked over where everything is. I'm really happy where everything's placed, so let's get to actually digging these in.
When planting our perennials into such poor soil, it's a great idea to dig a hole a fair bit bigger than just the pot that you need and improve a nice little patch of soil around it. And even better is if you can be bothered to mix the soil in layers so that it goes native soil, a sort of 50-50 mix of native soil and compost, and then into compost, a really rich soil. And it will help reduce what's called the bathtub effect, which is where you essentially end up with a bucket that's just made of soil cut into the ground that you're then just filling with compost and a pot plant. Gradually changing the soil from enriched to complete native does wonders for the medium-term health of the plant. And I repeated this process with each of the plants until I ran into a bit of an issue with a couple of them.
Not sure how this is going to show up on camera, but I have hit a tree stump. I kind of lost track of where the original tree stump that was here was. Turns out it's right here, which is a bit annoying. This would be a huge task to try and get rid of this. Ugh.
So after contemplating my options, I decided to go with the most difficult route and remove the annoying thick tree root. Unfortunately, my chainsaw was dead blunt. From the last time I had to de-stump a tree, I hit a rock and it completely blunted the whole blade, and I haven't had a chance to sharpen it since then. But that was future Ryan's problem. But now I am future Ryan, and I'm having to try and remove this tree root with a 36-volt butter knife. Once I could get the old Agapanthus Eliminator 5000 under there, I quickly realized I was probably better off just chopping it off on the left-hand side right at the stump, and then actually just leveraging out as much of this root from the rest of the bed as I possibly could, even though that would probably disturb some of the plants that I've already planted. But not without one last go at Captain No Choppy.
This annoying stuff like clearing away tree roots is all the stuff that I usually leave off camera, so I hope you're enjoying it. Oh, great. Oh. This root chop is sponsored by our Patreon, or my Patreon, and the Patreon members. Thank you very much. Consider checking it out. It helps keep this channel running. And maybe if enough of you join, I can afford a sharper tree saw. Just kidding. I'm a sucker for just trying to make old tools work. I probably wouldn't buy a new tree saw no matter how many of you joined. Oh, yes. Victory. I'm going to enjoy burning this. So that is how you dig a hole for black currants. If you don't want to dig around, cut out massive tree roots. Red currants are also an option. No guarantee that you won't have to dig out roots. There's still some remnants of it, but...
And thank you to all of you yelling me in my comments, telling me to get a hori hori, which is a tool that I'm using here on screen. It is the handiest tool I've ever come across.
Yeah. Oh, see, that wasn't so hard. This nasturtium has seen better days. All right, being able to cool down, have a drink. I need to really crack on, and we'll just try and smash out getting these planted.
The Tamarillo, Bay Tree, and Boysenberry all going great and really quickly. However, I then run into another issue when trying to plant out the finger lime. There was a thick layer of stones right underneath where I needed to plant it, so I needed to get out the old mattock and just start going away at it again. And this is just the reality of gardening sometimes. It's a whole lot of work before you can even get to the point where you can start what you would probably call actually gardening. Especially in my yard, it seems to just be obstacle after obstacle, and I'm sure there are a lot of people watching that have yards and obstacles of their own similar to this, and I really hope this helps inspire you that yes, it sucks, yes, it takes time, but yeah, you can get out and do it too. Between the tree root and the rocks, even though it looks quick on screen, that added an additional 3 hours of just hard slogging labor to this project. And if I let you guys in on a secret, this is actually the third time I've tried to make a video like this, but I've usually ended up just canning the project because too much of the video ends up just being moving rocks, chopping down logs, digging dirt, instead of what you're probably actually here to see, which is all of the planting out of the plants. But I would love to do more of these project-based videos where I actually tackle something and then bring you along with me. So if you've been enjoying this, please let me know in the comments, because I have no idea if you're going to like this video or not.
Oh my God. Now that our middle layers are in here, we can talk about ground covers as I clear away a couple rocks. Now the main ground cover I really want to use are strawberries, and I have a whole bunch of strawberry plants to use. This is about a dozen runners, and probably once this video is done off camera, I'm going to actually dig up all the other strawberries from in a couple different places around my yard and plant them in here. Now strawberries, this is by far not even close to one of the best ways to grow strawberries. Strawberries, if you can, you want them elevated, you want the fruit off the ground. But what we can do here is make sure that our strawberries are growing on top of mulch, which means that the strawberries are going to be one of the last things that we're planting here. The layer before we kind of get to our ground covers is what's called our herbal layer, our herbaceous layer, which I'm going to be planting things like rosemary, thyme, oregano, perennial basil, perpetual spinach or perennial spinach. Some of these I'm going to be putting in here, some I will be doing at a later date just because I'm going to take them from cuttings from other plants. I don't have them ready to go. So far today, I do have thyme ready to go. In my experience, the hardier variety of thyme that you can get in just Bunnings or whatever is the one that's called pizza thyme. The one that's called garden thyme, I haven't had as much of a success with, especially in dodgier soils. But pizza thyme I've found is quite hardy. It's also quite drought resistant. If you set it up right, you can also just take cuttings and plant them direct into wherever you're sowing. Again, just look for your nice kind of young, tender growth. Snip it off, clear off all but the top couple leaves. Probably just bang it in over here. Make sure to really nice and firm down near it so that there's always going to be contact with the actual cutting.
Next, I took some mustard and radish seeds and sowed them directly into the soil. The radishes will continue to help break apart the soil as they grow, and mustard greens help suppress the germination of other nearby seeds, so it'll help reduce pressure from weeds.
Now I'm going to mulch this area.
As is the unofficial slogan in this channel, don't forget the mulch. I'm first starting out by a layer of fallen leaves because it is late autumn, so they're abundantly available. As this stuff breaks down, it does become an incredible topsoil. Once I have a fairly thick layer of leaves, I also then just top it with some straw mulch, mostly so it matches the rest of my garden. Although sugarcane mulch does have this nice little property where once it gets a bit wet and then dries, it does glue itself together a little bit, which it helps stop these leaves blowing all the way across my yard.
Now I can get on to strawberries. Now these sort of alfresco gift type plantings of most plants are one of the easiest ways to not get scammed, but get bad value for money products. But in this occasion, when I was actually in Bunnings and looking this over, there's about a dozen or more strawberry crowns in this, and it was about $23, I think. So I thought that since that works out to be about $2 a strawberry plant compared to about $4 to $5 for buying them individually, this seemed like a good steal. It's just that I now have to actually separate them. Always be willing to work out a cheaper way, even if it's a tiny bit more work.
Out of the basket of strawberries, I got 10 little groups of crowns. Some have multiple crowns, some are individual. I have no real strategy with where I'm planting these. I'm just sort of finding wherever space is. If you're planting strawberries directly into soil instead of somewhere elevated where the fruit can dangle over the edge, the main thing you need to do is make sure you've got lots of just dry, clean mulch underneath. The saying is they're called strawberries for a reason, because they love growing on top of straw. This is because the fruit really hates growing or resting on anything, but of all the options, straw is the best.
All right, I'm now running extremely low on light, time, card space, got to walk the dog, got to cook the family dinner. I've just rolled out the soaker hose. It's starting to fill up. This will start drip feeding this. I'll leave that on for probably an hour, maybe just a bit over. I'm going to give it a really good hand watering as well for basically as long as I can afford to be out here. And then really importantly, because it's autumn here, nearly winter, I'm gonna cover the whole thing in gardener's fleece. This will help just protect everything from the frost. It's not meant to frost tonight, but it's still meant to get quite cold, and given everything's just been transplanted when they're all probably starting to want to go dormant. I want to do everything that I can to try and protect them. And yeah, so I'll do all that, and then I'll probably come back in a couple days so that you can see how everything started to grow in. And in seemingly the blink of an eye, it's actually been an entire month since I've planted this, but look at it, it's bursting with new growth. Which is incredible considering this is now entering into the proper dead of winter. We're past the winter solstice at the moment. A lot of this stuff is properly dormant, but there's new growth popping up here, there, and everywhere. Which generally, when you're planting out or transplanting something, and it immediately puts on a bunch of new growth, it usually means that you've got your soil conditions pretty bang on. Which makes me very thankful that I spent the whole first half of this video just fiddling around with the soil trying to get it right, especially because this is planted on top of some of the poorest soil I've ever planted into. I've also now planted out a bunch of spare flowers that I've had lying around. There are some pansies for some immediate colour because those are in season. I've got a fair few daffodils and other bulbing flowers just planted around here and there that are now starting to emerge but aren't quite in flower yet. The nasturtium that I half killed has now bounced back really well to the point where I might have to consider taking it out. I'll see how it develops though. And all of the seeds that we threw in here seem to be coming up pretty well. The only things that aren't looking that great is some of the strawberries are starting to die back a bit, but that's to be expected because it's their dormant season. But those should just come back fine once spring gets here. And then the blackberries that we've printed are looking a little bit sad, so that might be the one thing that we'll have to replant once spring gets around. But now that I'm seeing it all develop, there is one last thing that I want to put in that was always part of the plan for my food forest, but I thought might not work in this area, but we're going to give it a go. Now you might recognize this tray from the Weird Garden Tips video. These are little carrot seedlings sewn directly into toilet roll holders. Now you can even see that I'm starting to get the taproot coming through, which means that there is a chance that the carrots can not develop too well or deform a bit. But that's not actually the reason I'm planting these. I'm not expecting to get any harvest out of any of these. What I'm really trying to do with these is get them planted, let them go through an entire life cycle where they'll go to flower, go to seed, so that then for the rest of time, I should have this continuous cycle of self-seeding carrots over here, so that every season after this first one, I should be able to come out and then just grab out carrots and leave a couple at the end of each season for them to go to flower and then start the process again. Oh, and this is the first video that I'll be releasing since the channel turned 1 year old. So thank you so much to everyone who's been a part of the journey. It's been incredible. There's now nearly 65,000 subscribers. I'm getting over 1 million views a month. It's crazy the amount of people that want to watch me talk about broccoli. If you do want to support the channel, all you need to do is tell a friend, watch another video, hit like on this one. It's really that simple. If you really want, you can support the Patreon or buy a hoodie or something like that. But if not, thank you so much. It's been an awesome journey and I look forward to awesomer, bigger, better videos. One of the ones that I'm really excited to share with you over the next couple of weeks is behind me, but I'll probably have to blur it out. So make sure you subscribe and watch the new videos when they come out. Maybe turn on the bell notification. Thank you so much. Don't buy a hoodie. I will see you next time.